Welcome to the big garden and its organized chaos. As you can see, the garden is winding down. I've been pulling the pea vines out and saving the seeds from them. It's a bit of a process. Glenn has some oats seeded here as cover crop. It's a late seeding of lettuce here that we have. This lettuce should be delicious, though we are having some super hot days right now. And we've got some cabbage coming. We tried this like an insect netting, and I have to be honest, I'm super disappointed in it. And I can't remember, we bought two, and I can't remember the names of it. But you can see, maybe you can see, the netting already has like big enough holes in it that flea beetles could get through there. So pretty sad about that. These cabbage were planted in here when it was scorching hot out. And cabbage is kind of a cold weather crop, so we could cover it with something and hopefully it will keep growing until it freezes really hard. Maybe we might actually get a cabbage or two out of here. We'll see. The onion patch is starting to wind down. Corbin's been harvesting some onions out of there as they're tipping over, and you can see there's a bunch more to pull. The tomatoes and peppers in the middle aren't doing stellar, but the Manitoba tomatoes are the ones that I've been getting some tomatoes from to start with. The sunflowers are just beautiful. The bees are just starting to wake up. I love being out in the garden when the bees just start to wake up. It's really something. It's at this point in late August that all the corn is ready now, and we can save as much as we want, and the rest I'll be drying for the chickens to eat over the winter. Also this time of year, as I'm harvesting the carrots, I just start at the end of the row and I'll just go down, pull all the carrots out. And if there's little ones like that, I don't use them. I know that I should or could, but you'll just see the amount of carrots that we have. Some of those are still going to Garden Box customers, and some we're keeping. In the big garden, I have already been out here and topped the tomatoes the best I could. Looks like I can come back out and cut off some more blossoms to help those tomatoes ripen. It is quite a jungle here, as some stuff is overripe and gone to seed, like the Swiss chard there. I can still use some leaves from the bottom, but the chickens are happy to eat those tops that we don't. There's some more beets back here and tons and tons of green beans. We started pulling out the green beans yesterday because it's getting to the end of their season. The plants still look good, but we have all we need. And I know that after it freezes, it's even a little bit harder to get them out of the ground. I think that we should save some of the green bean plants just to go to seed, so we have some of that. The sweet potatoes are looking awesome. They're a little weedy here. They're in this row, but I can't wait to see what's underneath them. The squash are just going crazy back here along the second row of corn, and I'm really excited. Right now, you can see some squash, but it really isn't until the vines start to die back that you can see just how many you have. And thankfully, I've noticed quite a few of the kabocha squashes coming. That's a Japanese pumpkin, and it is delicious. It looks a lot like a buttercup squash, but it's quite different. I have buttercup growing at the other end of the garden, just so that they don't get confused with each other. We have massive amounts of dill in the garden, and you can see this is going to seed. We'll save some of this. However, I would like Glenn to help me pull out most of this dill this year, because really, I mean, a little dill seed goes a long way, and you've seen how much dill we have in the garden. I have been happily harvesting from the garden for ourselves. I did take a little break from garden boxes 1 week just so that I could work on that. And then Glenn and I were so busy doing cow stuff that we spent 8 hours of a couple of days off I had doing that. So that didn't work out so good, but I have been taking advantage of having a little bit more energy and having some help to get the garden stuff in. You can see this here is a leek. I've been harvesting leeks from different places around the yard, and I'll get those in because the tops are starting to die back a little bit, and that's a good sign for me that it's time for them to come in.
Leeks can be a little bit tricky to get out of the ground, but these guys weren't planted that deeply, so I'm just gonna gently give it a tug, and thankfully I didn't break it off. So yeah, that's kind of funny. There's 2 leeks growing on the side of this one, and I just put my leftover leeks into this bed instead of the big garden, but they did really well here. Okay, like I said, these are just my extra leeks that I planted in the raised garden box. And as you can see, I didn't break any of them when I pulled them out. But my other ones in the garden, I'm definitely going to loosen the soil with a shovel or a fork. Otherwise, they will snap about this far up because they're planted about this deep into the ground. All right, let's go to get these cleaned up. I let the leeks dry on the counter on a towel till completely dry. I'm going to be using these little ones right away, and the ends that I cut off because I'm going to store them in this container. And I have just a couple of pieces of fresh paper towel in the bottom, and so I'll just lay them into the box. And it's okay if I stack them in layers because I'm going to be using these and certainly at least checking on them often so that they don't go bad and cause a whole bunch of rot. This was my first batch of onions that I pulled out of the ground. I'm going to look through it today to see what's going on. Looks pretty ready to me, except for like the odd one, which is fine, whatever. Over here is the second batch that was pulled. Corbin did it. And so we'll take a look through that and make sure everything is good and not rotting like that. It's got white rot. So we'll make sure that we catch those. This onion had a bigger neck to start with, but it has shrunk down nicely in the wind and the fresh air. And so I feel like that's good for storage. There's nothing wrong with that. And then, so I always check the bottom of the onion to make sure there's no rot happening. And I've missed my point where I can tie these in onto a string like I normally do, but that's okay. So I'm just gonna pull off what will pull off. I don't force anything off. I just sort of give it a rub. And what's gonna happen is that I have this onion bag that I have used previously. It's just a mesh bag, and I'll put the onions in here that don't have a long enough top on them to tie anymore, and then I'll hang that in the garage so it gets good airflow, and that's what it'll look like for these onions that I can't tie up. Last but not least, the potato patch is really showing that the plants are nearing the end of their life cycle. We wait until the tops die back before we harvest the potatoes because until that point, the potatoes themselves, the skin is too immature and any little bump will peel the skin back on it. So once the tops are dead, we'll dig up the potatoes and that'll be it for this year.